Hello and welcome to the YouTube channel Veganika. And I'm Roger Yates and with Nika herself. And we're here to talk about vegan aggression and also the legacy of Gary Yourofsky. And that's kind of really, I think, Nika, was based on my comments, was it, about Yourofsky's legacy that you questioned? Is that right?
Yes, maybe let me also introduce myself to your audience,
Okay.
because this video is going to be uploaded to both of channels.
Yeah,
So,
we do
like you said,
a twin thing. It's going backward. Yeah.
I am Nika, and first thing I really need to explain, I am non-English speaker. I'm from Poland. I'm Polish activist, vegan activist, and please forgive me if you find my English improper or if there are some mistakes. It may happen.
Well, I've seen your YouTube channel, and you've done quite a few videos in English, and I thought you did really good. So, no problem.
I am quite nervous, and I'm very happy to meet you because I like your channel, and some of your videos I find really excellent. Like, for example, about it will be very difficult for me to pronounce McDonaldization. How do you pronounce this?
That's it. Yeah, McDonaldization. Yes, that's right.
Yeah, I think this is very good, very interesting. But unfortunately, in that video about Gary Yourofsky, I would say I slightly disagree in one point to up to I strongly disagree in
Yeah.
some other
Okay.
points.
So, do you want me to lay out my position then?
Yes, please, please,
Yeah.
yes, because people may not know the context.
Yeah. Okay. Well, just for the people on your channel, my name is Roger Yates. I've been a vegan since 1979. And we've actually had some dealings over the years with Gary Yourofsky. But I want to say right from the beginning that in isolation, the Georgia University Tech talk, the famous talk, is very good. In fact, I was part of a group called AR Zone at the time when it came out, and I think it came out about 2012, maybe 2011, and it was like heavily promoted. And we promoted it as well because it was good, and the Q&A is good too. So it was heavily promoted. In fact, in those days, there was earlier versions of the famous talk on YouTube where Gary Yourofsky wasn't very fluent. And so, it was before he became fluent in doing the same talk over and over again, as it were. So those were taken down, and now we've just got the kind of famous talk. So in that sense, just in isolation, I've always said that I think that talk is good. And so if it were that was his legacy, then that wouldn't be so bad for the movement, in my view. In fact, I remember talking to somebody at Cube of Truth, and they were giving out their card, which had the speech reference on the card, and I said that I didn't support Gary Yourofsky's position as a general matter, and they said, well, it shouldn't matter because they only get the reference to the talk, and they're not likely to see anything else that he said. And so that's the kind of good part, if you like, and that's probably the part of the legacy that we would probably tolerate of Gary Yourofsky. The real problem is that Yourofsky is a bit of a ticking time bomb, and that's because of the things that he said in the past about violence. He tends to be a little bit of a violence fantasist, and so repeatedly he's talked about violent acts against people who are using other animals, to the extent that he says that he wants all carnivores to die. So that essentially would probably mean most people, watching this are probably going to be not vegan for very long. And so that means he wanted you to die before you were vegan. He probably wants your family to die. So there's a problematic thing there. And the real problem is that Yourofsky is seen as a spokesperson, a kind of poster person for the movement. And when you're in that position, it gives you responsibilities. And that means that you've got to be careful about the optics of what you say. And it's that where Gary Yourofsky has been a bit of a failure, because he's kind of allowed his temper to get the best of him. And rather than thinking about the cause. He's more really thought about himself and his own reactions to things. Whereas when you're in a spokesperson position, you've got to take that position quite seriously because you're seen as representing a cause, not just yourself. So that's my general kind of feelings about Yourofsky.
Oh, okay, yeah, maybe the last argument I understand. Maybe you are right if about the last argument, because I have been always perceiving him rather as a private person. So first, I would like to emphasize the human aspect, and I have noticed that since I declared myself as vegan, I'm no longer perceived as a person, as a woman, but people are judging me as vegan. So for example, because I'm a woman, so I noticed in several places, many people are commenting, for example, about my appearance, but they never perceive me as a woman anymore, but as vegan. So for example, they are judging how vegan is aging. So for example, nobody has an idea that maybe I'm aging because maybe I'm old. They write, she looks old because she's vegan, not because I'm old, because she's vegan. And everything is like, we are not human anymore. I feel being perceived as an alien since I declared I'm vegan. So I perceive Gary Yourofsky as a human, and what I see like very natural human reaction to injustice, to extreme injustice. And this is like kind of raw natural reaction to extreme situation, and everybody is processing it differently. I can give you an example how I processed this shock when I was, for example, a little girl, when it was my first contact with animal abuse, and how I am processing it right now as an adult. I see also my son is processing this completely different, but also I think it's very important for us to communicate to society how damaging and harmful this extreme situation is for us as human. Because to be honest, since I have learned how terrible the situation is, because actually before I went vegan, I didn't know how terrible it was. Like I knew that this is terrible to kill animals, that this is injustice, but I didn't know how terrible. So I feel that after learning how terrible it is, I feel my life has been stolen. There is no more life for me. It's not possible to live my own happy life in this world. So I understand, Yourofsky's position. I understand that his heart is broken, and he had been stolen his life. And I think it's not me. It's not Gary Yourofsky. I see these kind of reactions in many people. Doesn't matter vegan or non-vegan. I see what Gary Yourofsky said in these words, words. They are very polite, very delicate. I see much stronger statements and words in average people who are even non-vegan. I see the reactions. I'm checking the reactions, how people react to true footages from farms. So hundreds, thousands of people have very sadistic dreams, like what they would wish to do to those people. People are craving justice. And I'm talking to those people. So I'm asking, but are you vegan? And many of them say, no, I'm not vegan because it won't help anything. What if I go vegan if there are, there are billions? For example, in Poland, there are 1.1 billion of chickens murdered every year. So people are asking me, what if I go vegan? There are billions of them. It won't help. So I want to say that this is not vegan's reaction. This is human reaction when, like, typical a sensitive person sees this level of injustice. So normal human is reacting in this way. So I will tell you what was my first reaction was when I was a little girl. The first time I realized that something was wrong when I was a little girl, when I was approximately 5 years old. I went to visit my grandmother in village, and there was a pig slaughtered in the village. So I heard her scream for, I don't know, it was like a never ending. It took so long, so long. So for me as a little girl who was only hearing this, was like never ending, was like eternity, this scream. And I was asking, where are people? Why nobody is running to help? Somebody is, somebody screaming for help, and nobody, like I'm asking my mother, why nobody is going? Why nobody will help the pig? This is normal. So for me, it was catastrophe as a little girl to hear that this is normal. This is normal to kill the pig. I heard, and I felt in that day that was I the only living soul in that whole village who heard this scream. And so I had the fantasies. So this was the only way to process this trauma. So I had fantasies that I'm covering like pigs or cows' body with my own body, and then I'm saying, please kill me, don't kill the cow. So this was the way how I could deal with this horrible situation as a little girl. So I dealt in this way, in fantasies. So, but for example, if my son is seeing footages from slaughterhouse, no, his fantasies are different. He has very sadistic fantasies. So, and not only him, I see many people share this kind of attitude. Many people really declare they would love to do justice by themselves and do give those people the same what they are doing. So I think what Gary Yourofsky said was very like was less than 1% of what typical human normally feels in the circumstances. And I think we should communicate to the society that it's not a matter of vegans, it's a human problem. And we should also communicate how huge harm is being done for us as human. Because, for example, for me, I know my life has been stolen. It's not possible to enjoy. Of course, I'm a cheerful person naturally. So my mood is rather elevated, I would say. It's rather above average. It's like chemistry in my brains. I'm not depressive kind of person. So I'm glad. And I try to care of myself because I want to serve animals. So sometimes I watch comedies, like it is like a hygiene, like psychological hygiene. But this is just hygiene. But also my heart is broken inside. It's only I care to keep a good mood. And that's it. But I think it's very difficult to live in this world, and that's the question, how everybody is going to process this information, how bad the world is. So for example, me, a big help for me is my faith. So I'm praying for animals a lot. I'm praying. So this is my way to deal with this. I completely cannot imagine how atheists are dealing with this situation. I think, I don't know what, if I was an atheist, maybe I would commit suicide. I don't know. It's not, I think this agriculture, animal agriculture is harming all sensitive people a lot. So first of all, I perceive Gary Yourofsky as a human with broken heart, expressing his true feelings. So I appreciate that he says the truth.
Yeah, well, obviously there's a lot in that, and I mean, interesting actually. I don't know whether you know this. You know who Donald Watson is. He's the best known co-founder of the vegan social movement. So he co-founded the Vegan Society in the 1940s, and he had exactly the same experience as you. When he was a boy, he heard a pig being slaughtered, and the pig, I mean, pigs are very vocal, especially,
Yes.
yeah, especially when they're scared,
Yes.
and so he had the same kind of thing, and there's no doubt that that Watson was enraged about it as well. And similar, if you think about someone like Tom Reagan, who wrote the Case for Animal Rights, well, as a student he was a butcher, but then through Gandhi he learned the truth, and he was kind of challenged by Gandhi, as it were, to see his fork as a weapon. And once he did that, he became a full-blown animal rights advocate. And of course, he was very angry about the rights violations that he saw all around. So the normal human reaction, being horrified and then angered by things, that's not really in question. It's more to do with what do you do with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so the real issue then is if you set yourself up as a spokesperson, that's when you've got to think carefully, because it's not as though you can just maintain for years and years a situation where you're just totally enraged and you're just stomping around the room. It's not as though you've seen it there and then all the time. I mean, we know, as vegans, we know what goes on. We can even probably tell you how many other animals are killed per second of this kind of thing. And in the 80s, there was a slogan. In Britain, there was one animal killed in a laboratory every 6 seconds. So we had these figures in our heads, and that makes you angry. But it's then a question of what do you do
with this? Yes.
Yeah, and so that's one side of it. The other side then is the idea that Yourofsky seems to have this almost biblical eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth kind of issue. And he wants to visit upon humans what they visit upon other animals. And as a sociologist, that's a bit naive in a way, because, people are part of their culture. They've been brought into a speciesist culture. They've learnt the norms and values of their culture, which is imbued with animal welfarism. It's possible to eat them and not harm them and all those kind of things. And they have all this kind of bouncing around in their heads. And so to some extent, they are a victim of their culture. And so the way out of that is to educate them. And in fact, Yourofsky would agree with that. But you don't educate them by saying to them that you want to see them raped or shot and incredibly violent things to happen to them, brutally sexually assaulted. I mean, those things descend to kind of juvenile kind of violence fantasies. And for a spokesperson, even if you had it in your head, you don't verbalize it, you don't write it down. You certainly don't go on TV and say that, because that then becomes just naive. Because although, and in some ways, that's why I think Yourofsky plays well in the vegan community, because he's articulating what people are feeling. So I understand that. I totally understand that. I get that. And it's the kind of way that we might talk to each other. But you wouldn't necessarily go up to a journalist and say it. So I think that's where the naivety comes in. And the fact that you've kind of forgotten that this is a cause. We're in it for the long haul. And also, from a sociological point of view, social movements are claims makers. We make claims. Now, Tom Reagan himself said that if you're going to make a claim, you want people to hear you. And people will hear you if you speak rationally and softly, educationally. But not if you insult and if you berate, if you shout at people. And so I tend to think that Yourofsky was really poor on the optics of what was going on. I understand the rage. I'm not even disputing that. I understand that bit.
I see two different things which I would like to comment in what you said. First of all, whether it is naive or not, whether it's like the effective way to speak to people or not. And the other thing is whether he really meant to be violent to all meat eaters. I don't think so. I think there are, because I also myself see like two categories of meat eaters. So then I will move to this one. But first, I don't believe that to be effective, you should be rational. As I'm watching several vegan channels, I think they exaggerate with logic and rational arguments, because decision making is not based on logic, but mainly on emotions. So I think the emotional style is very effective. So he has his emotional style, he appeals to emotions, and I think it's very effective because I see the effect on me and on my son. I've been vegan for actually a surprisingly short time. Regarding that, I've been sensitive about animals since my childhood. I've been vegan for just only 1.5 years so far. Why? What is the difference between me being vegan and me before? The main difference is before I didn't believe I can change anything. I just after this horrible experience from my childhood, then I learned that just life is brutal. That's what I had been taught. Life is brutal. I must accept it. I must live somehow in it. And so I thought, until that point, I thought it is so brutal and I am so helpless as an individual. I can do completely nothing. The only thing I can do is just to distance myself from this. This the only thing that I can protect only myself. I cannot protect animals. I can protect. This is what I thought. And for example, if I was to hear to very like rational explanation why we should go, I don't think it would have a chance to affect me. But if I see somebody charismatic, speaking from his heart with so much strength, so much power, good. No, for me, I also recognize Gary Yourofsky as talent. So I am an artist, so I am very sensitive about where I see a talent. I think the biggest problem with Gary Yourofsky is that he's like the only one, the only such talent who I would compare his acting, his ability to persuade people to, I don't know, the acting of Leonardo DiCaprio or Al Pacino. He's very expressive. So it affects. So for example, until then, I didn't believe my decision can change anything. I thought I can do nothing. I am like just one single person. I won't help. So it affected me a lot. I might say that actually this was both, because once you start watching Gary Yourofsky, then soon YouTube is proposing you Joey Carbstrong. So I began watching them both, Gary Yourofsky, Joey Carbstrong. I was already on my way to veganism, but it was like I was searching for vegan dishes. So I was deciding, okay, I will learn more and more dishes there. So then maybe I will. My goal was to become finally vegan. But after I met Gary Yourofsky and Joey Carbstrong about the same time, like immediately the next day I became fully vegan. So I know that this is working. This is effective. I see talent in it. The way they speak, especially the way Gary Yourofsky speaks, I started believing that the change is possible.
Well, I would say, I mean, obviously, again, a lot there, but I mean, if you want a passionate speech, which is regarded as the greatest animal rights speech ever given, there's a speech from 1988 delivered by Tom Reagan, and it's called Sword of Justice. And it's still regarded by very many people as the best speech ever delivered in the movement. And that's full of passion. He talks about how he's an extremist, and meaning that he said, I'm an extremist about rape. I'm against it all the time. It's a very, very powerful speech.
Yeah, I think it must be powerful.
Yeah, well, this is powerful.
But
this is more powerful. It's actually better than the famous Yourofsky one, in my view. So there's that, and I want to go back to the thing about the meat eaters, which he called carnivores. I want to share my screen in a minute. I just want to ask you two questions as a woman. Aren't you disturbed in a patriarchal society to see a man saying that he wishes to see women brutally sexually assaulted? And also, even if you agreed with that and you would say it also, would you go on TV and say it, or would you think twice?
First of all, I don't believe that. It's hard for me to believe that Gary Yourofsky really meant all meat eaters as a mass. Because I also perceive there are some people like really, really cold-hearted. I also have a problem with them. For example, let me tell you shortly about the situation in Poland recently, because we had been through a horrible battle over the amendment to act on animal protection recently, and Parliament already wanted to ban fur industry and slaughter and ritual slaughter, kosher and halal. and there were so many protests against it. 70,000 of farmers went to the streets. They sabotaged this project so much that now Parliament withdrew this project. So I feel so devastated about this, because there were not other people protesting for this, that they want this ban. So there were only protests against. So again, fur industry is legal, like nothing changed, and we are, we are a huge meat producer, like #1 poultry producer in European Union. We are producing 80% of our beef is going for export to Israel and others. So we are, although we are a Catholic country, there's a lot of kosher slaughter in Poland. And when I'm talking to Polish people, because yes, I shot a video about this problem, and I received many comments, and even Polish people who are Catholics or are non-believers at all, they say, I prefer kosher meat, it tastes better. So why Polish guy requires an animal to suffer more? Why? Because he likes this. So there are people so cold, so cruel.
Yeah.
They say, I don't care. I like that animals suffer. So,
I don't think that's under dispute, to be honest, Nika. But as a woman, what do you feel about a man wanting to brutally see or wish for the rape of women?
No, because I wouldn't identify with those cold women who say, I don't care. I would understand what he means. I think he meant this kind of very cold-hearted people who say, I don't care. If animal suffers, I don't mind. It's okay. I like it. I even like it more. To me, the people say that I like kosher meat more. So I think those are this kind, because we have, of course, we have a lot of discussion about furs. Furs, it's themselves, right? Fur industry and furs. So there are some, celebrities who say, I prefer natural fur. I don't like artificial fur. I prefer. So I'm sure that Gary Yourofsky meant this kind of cold-hearted women.
Do you think people are fully? Do you think people and women who wear fur are fully aware of how their garment came into being, do you think? Or do you think that?
I think there are some people who are aware, who are part of it, who are even dealing with this. They are working there. They do this. They know it. They see it, and they are fine with this. But there are also a lot of people who are not aware. So of course, I don't think Gary Yourofsky meant those unaware people. Of course, I will tell you, in Poland, it's very difficult to be vegan, because we hardly have any vegan products in our shops. So somebody must be really very determined to keep being vegan. So I understand that for people who are not very close to animals and who are not,
I'm really impressed by your passion. As you said, you're a relatively new vegan, and I'm impressed by that. And it comes across that you really care. But we're kind of in a movement situation. So let me just share you this screen. Let's see if I can get the technology right. There we go. So I think I've got to drop you out. Okay, so this is the famous section where Yourofsky talks about raping women and killing men and all this kind of stuff. So this is from the Fur Commission. The same thing comes from, this is called the National Animal Interest Alliance. So essentially, this is to get animal welfareists against vegans by saying what Yourofsky says. This is from Yourofsky's own site, so it's still there. I've only just pulled that up, and this is from the AR's own site. And it says, deep down, I truly hope that oppression, torture, and murder return to each uncaring human tenfold. I hope that fathers accidentally shoot their sons on hunting excursions, while carnivores suffer heart attacks that kill them slowly. He's talking about carnivores, as in, yeah. So he's talking about meat eaters. Stop sharing. So, he doesn't say, I hope that women involved in the fur industry are raped, and that women who are cold about wearing fur coats are raped. He just says any woman ensconced in fur should suffer a rape. Now, for a spokesperson, this is unacceptable stuff. You know, it's like a teenager's violence fantasy.
Yeah, because I would never take those words separately from this whole context of what he probably meant. That I would rather tell myself that probably I suppose I know what kind of people he means.
On that very point, I would have thought that if he was to say, and I think someone like you would say this, is kind of, well, I was in a rage, you know, I've seen what goes on, animal use, animal rights violations, absolutely terrible, vast numbers, you know, huge numbers, talking about billions of individuals. And I was really angry, and I wrote that down. And so when I was part of AR Zone in 2013, we interviewed Gary Yourofsky because his film was just getting popular. And, you know, it was starting to make a stir, early days of the internet in a sense. And so we interviewed him, and I asked him, it was my question, I asked him if he was willing to retract those words of violence against women, etc. And he said no. He said that he thought his words were beautiful. He thought his words in which he wished women to be raped were beautiful. And I just lost all respect for the guy when he said that.
Probably I would rather perceive him as an artist and wouldn't take literally what he says.
Well, this was his answer to me. I asked him the question.
Yeah. I see. Yeah, definitely it should. Yeah, it's weird.
I already said right at the beginning, in isolation, that talk is very effective. And a lot of people, it's interesting really, I've got this concept called jigsaw, right? And it's very similar to what you just said. In some senses, what you saw from Carbstrong and Yourofsky kind of gave you the final piece of your jigsaw, and then you were a vegan. What Tom Reagan says is that most people are muddlers. We muddle along, and he says that we muddle along and we get this little fact, and we're thinking about that, and we're thinking about this, and then suddenly we look in the mirror and there's an animal rights person looking back at us. And what happens is that people become vegan because they put their jigsaw together. And what a lot of people do is remember some of the pieces and they forget a lot of the others.
Yes.
Yeah. And some of the pieces are the powerful things, you know, like Tom Reagan's thing or Gary Yourofsky's thing. And so then they translate that to, oh, Gary Yourofsky made me go vegan, right? When I speak to people, you actually find that that's not actually true. That was one piece, albeit in the jigsaw. And in fact, I spoke to one person. They said, well, actually, when I come to think of it, I wasn't vegan. I saw the speech, and 8 months later, I was still not vegan. And then something else happened, which I can't remember. And then I became vegan. And so I, as a sociologist, in terms of kind of methodology, if you like, or surveys, it's really interesting to me because it seems to me that a lot of claims about the numbers of vegans that Yourofsky created are exaggerated. And so that's interesting to me. I mean, I'm a friend with Ronnie Lee. Ronnie Lee, for the people on your channel who don't know, he co-founded the Animal Liberation Front. Now, he went vegan when Gary Yourofsky was 2 years old. I went vegan when Gary Yourofsky was 9 years old. And yet we're told that Gary Yourofsky has made more vegans than anybody else in history. And in fact, there are new vegans who actually think that Gary Yourofsky started the vegan movement. There's a kind of like a rewriting of history going on. You know, it's 1984 all over again. And for my generation, we know about the beginning of the vegan movement in 1944 and this kind of stuff. You know, things didn't start with Yourofsky. And as I said, I'm quite willing to say, in isolation, that particular video is very good in isolation. And the Q&A, I actually really like the Q&A that is associated with it. But in terms of the guy's politics, in terms of the guy's personality, is a bit of a disaster. And it would be rather good if he stayed in retirement and just kind of faded away and we just show the film and nothing else. That's my view on it.
Me, I don't I don't take words that maybe seriously as you do. I see reality a bit different. I don't maybe listen to words that much as I perceive like all, like everything. So I wouldn't tend to, but okay, I understand your position right now, but I also think that we should use our psyche as a tool and like create characters which are strong, persuasive. And if he created this kind of character, very straightforward, very strong, even if he's using exaggeration, I take it as, perceive it as like less artistic means to this, like this is his creation. I perceive it as creation.
But surely it can go to. I exactly understand you. Certainly from that artistic point of view. You know, I'm very close to an artist, and she thinks like you, not same as you about
So I
Yourofsky.
don't take literally, but
Yeah,
I
but yeah,
look at creation and
yeah, she interprets the world in a very similar way that you've just kind of said. But there's limits to it, and the cold reality is that if you set yourself up as a spokesperson, you have then signed up for a responsibility. So you know, you don't go. I mean,
yeah, I understand.
Yourofsky went on TV and said that he wanted to take the eyes out of meat eaters.
Don't
And
you think that he wanted just to move people's imagination? Like, how would this be? Not
I
that literally he wants.
it sounded like he was losing himself in a violence fantasy to me.
All right. I have just one more question related to this topic, because I have this video open, and because you accused him of redefining the word veganism, and okay, so he said that originally the creators of veganism, of vegan movement, meant okay, literally, I have your words actually. So veganism as a means to save humanity. Don't
That's
you
right.
think it sounds too much anthropocentric? Is veganism as a movement anthropocentric, or it's
Well, yeah, I can explain that. What it is, there's a focus and a scope to the vegan movement. The focus has always been on the other animals and what we do to them, but the scope of it has always been much wider. So the vegan movement, the vegan social movement, was started during the last years of the Second World War, and the people who started it said that they were shattered by the experience of war, and also they'd seen two world wars, and they were trying to work out why was it that human beings had become so violent. Why were we so nasty and brutish suddenly? And they wanted to try and work out what was going on. And so they analyzed that, and they said that we'd kind of de-evolved, and they thought that veganism was part of the moral evolution of humanity, and that if we adopt a vegan mindset, you would get a situation where we wouldn't exploit other animals, of course, but we also wouldn't exploit each other. And so in the founders of our movement's vision, there would probably be no such thing as sexual exploitation and those kind of things, because we would have a new kind of humanity, a more kind of enlightened humanity. They talk about this all the time. They talk about peace, they talk about non-violence, they talk about the moral evolution of humanity, and they talk about how our liberation of other animals will be our own liberation. And they say that repeatedly over and over again.
Yes, I get it, but don't you think that in era of capitalism, this maybe sounds like utopia, because people are not into peace, people are into easy
But
profit, and
veganism is a
especially
utopian.
chickens are so easy.
I understand that, Nika, but veganism is a utopian vision. It is. I mean, it's a vision of a peaceful humanity. You know, a humanity that no longer commits rights violations against anyone. That's the utopian vision of veganism. I tend to think that the vision of the pioneers of our movement is quite a beautiful thing, in the sense that they were hoping for the best for humanity, not looking for the worst, but they were also trying to challenge our barbarity. I mean, they use phrases like that, our barbarity, and how have we become so low in moral terms? How can we get out of this moral trough back to, I mean, maybe they had some kind of utopian vision of the future or something, but I personally don't think anything wrong with that, because that's what we need. I mean, the Earth is under threat of extinction right now. We need a bit of a utopian vision. And the vision of the pioneers of our movement was very radical. They were revolutionaries of their time. And I think that their views were very powerful. And I agree with them. But they did definitely say that our liberation of other animals would be our own liberation. They said that over and over again.
Okay, I got your point. Me, I'm quite obsessed about effectiveness, and
I'm very pleased to meet you. And I like I say, your passion and your concern and your empathy and your concern of what you see in the world really comes out. But that was actually what was the driving force for the birth of our movement back in the 1940s. That they wanted to do something about the terrible situation. And don't forget, I mean, that was kind of before factory farming. I mean, and in some ways.
So they didn't know how bad it's going to get. They didn't know yet.
Yeah, they didn't know that. And I imagine now, if you had a time machine and you could bring them into what we've got now, they'd be very, very shocked and disappointed and probably depressed, I would think.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, so maybe still I will have one more question. So don't you think, because you criticized Gary Yourofsky, but also you included Joy Carpston in it. But me, I was thinking recently when I saw what was happening in Poland. So in fact, I regretted then in Poland we don't have such personalities like Yourofsky or Joy Carpston. Probably I'm the most radical vegan channel in my country, and I'm small, so I don't have so much influence. But we don't have such people. People in Poland, most of people associate veganism with losing weight, with diet, but they are even shocked when I say it's about animals. So what are you talking about? So it's shock for people already. So we don't have such personalities like Joy Carpston. And when we had this situation recently that there was already a project to ban a fur industry. And like I said, it's huge. We are number 3 in the world, and now Denmark is already planning the ban. Maybe we'll be number 2 in the world. And there was a project to ban ritual slaughter for export. And crowds of people. Actually, the situation was very, very dangerous in Poland, because those angry farmers, they attacked all those politicians who were voted for this law, for this bill. They went to their houses, they threw manure to their houses, they were outside. So it was, they were threatening politicians. So the situation was horrible. 70,000 people went to the streets, but they went to houses, politicians' houses, to threaten their lives, their families. This was horrible. So they withdrew this bill. So me, I'm devastated. I'm thinking, if we had such personalities like Joy Carpston, if we had such people, maybe the situation would look different. What if we had like counter-protesters? What if government realized that there are also people supporting the bill, but there was nobody? Maybe only I recorded a video and like just one, voice. So I was thinking, because I'm quite obsessed about effectiveness. So I was thinking, wouldn't this be effective, and wouldn't it count into many millions of saved lives? Like, because there are many millions of minks and foxes being killed in Poland every year, but also I am so much devastated about this ritual slaughter, kosher. This is horrible situation. So I was thinking, wouldn't this be effective, this kind of approach, if we had this in Poland? What do you think? Would this change anything?
Well, I mean, the point is, if you want the emergence of someone, who speaks with passion and is forceful and direct and all those kind of things.
Yes, yes.
Well, that's grand. That's rather different from somebody who will want violence visited on human beings. So that's the two things don't go together. So there's no need for that. But I mean, it sounds like you've got a lot of work to do in your country, because
Absolutely.
that sounds like
we don't have veganism the way you already have it on the West.
You see, the thing is, there's a big fight going on in the vegan movement, because there are some people who want to make it a diet and about the other animals only and all this kind of stuff. And the kind of revolutionary vision of veganism is being squashed down. I mean, there's some major groups that are trying to do that. AV is one of them. They're trying to reduce the meaning of veganism. And this is a shame, because it's not useful. It's not necessary. We can tell people about the revolutionary potential of veganism. That's not a problem. So if you do get a spokesperson, it could be you. By all means, be passionate and be strong and forceful, like Tom Reagan. But you don't have to.
Maybe you don't need to. I don't need to include this element.
No, that's unnecessary. Also, it's kind of counterproductive, because, as you see, I mean, the fur industry attack Yourofsky for what he says. It's kind of giving them ammunition. They will use that against us. They will go to the politician and say, "Do you really want to support these people? This is what they stand for." They would use that kind of quote against us.
So then it's not effective anymore, and
it's not smart. It's not effective, and also it's just not right to wish that kind of violence against others. And I understand. I know what you mean about being angry in the kind of there and then. If somebody's beating a dog there and then, but the idea of kind of maintaining that kind of rage and violence in your claims making and thought processes for years and years is a bit odd to me, because you kind of don't do that. You kind of calm down and you think, how can I get my message across? And if Yourofsky thinks that he figured out the best way of getting his message across in terms of that, then I think he was wrong. In terms of things like the speech, then he was right. I mean, he mind you, then again, you see, I mean, he'd done that speech about 300 times, and so he was very good at it. By the time we've got, it's a little bit like a stand-up comedian. You're not so good at the beginning. You're not quite sure about the timing, and then you get better and better and better, and then you tend to record the DVD on the last of the gigs, right? And that kind of happened here. That Yourofsky was filmed when he really knew his material, and he knew his audience. He knew how to play to his audience. He knew the timing. He knew how the jokes and everything worked. So it's a good video for its time and for its purpose, if you like. In isolation, that's good. I've said that several times. I'll never argue against that. Just in isolation, you can see the benefit of that type of video. Unfortunately, you've got the personality that goes with it to contend with. So I was quite relieved when the guys retired. So going back to our original point about legacy, maybe the legacy will just be the film, and then the man and everything else will just fade away.
Probably, I think so.
Yeah, well, that'll be better than him coming back out of retirement, I'll tell you that.
All right, thank you very much for the meeting.
Yes, and you take care of yourself, and thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. Okay, bye-bye. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your attention.